The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
We are Rotary, committed heart and soul to build community.
Thank you for joining us and welcome once again to another edition of Service Matters. It's a weekly radio show that talks about the good things that are happening, not just locally, but around the country. How important it is to talk about good things, because the world's gotten a little crazy out there, and we want to do what we can to share certainly the good news. We also like to talk about good things at individuals. It could be organizations, it could be nonprofit groups that certainly share what they have with others. It could be something that makes dreams real for some folks out there that may be in need. Or it could be a nonprofit like the one we're going to talk about today that provides a shelter for folks who are experiencing a disaster. My special guest today is Kerry Murray. And before I talk with her, I did want to say that you're listening to WPRV and WPRO, the voice of Southern New England. We are a cumulus station. You can hear us on AM 630 or FM 99.7. And I'm Dave Clifton, happy to host this show because I think it means so much to so many different people. Kerry Murray, thank you so much for joining us. Kerry is the president of Shelter Box USA. And tell us where it's located. And Kerry, much appreciation to you for joining us here in the TV studio.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. And it is a privilege to serve as president of ShelterBox USA. So ShelterBox is a global humanitarian relief organization, and we work all around the world to tackle one of the biggest issues that's facing our world today, and that's global displacement. We're based in Santa Barbara, California, ShelterBox USA. And it's a privilege to be back here in New England. And here, as you know, I'm a New Englander and
Yeah, you got some roots
there. So I'm
the
so happy
province.
to be back
Yeah.
here. And I'm so grateful that you created an opportunity and a platform to share some of the good work that's happening in the world.
It's good to hear that you do have some roots here in the Providence area. As a matter of fact, our radio station does cover the Providence Friars, as well as the Celtics, and of course the New York Yankees, which is in another area. But you're a grad of Providence College, and you're here and just received a special award. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. So yes, I went to Providence College, and it created a great platform for me being at Providence to enter public service. I've been involved in service since very early in my college career, working at the Rhode Island State House and for several elected officials, and also a lobbyist for Save the Bay. And I just loved being part of the Providence College community and also being part of the Rhode Island community. So it's exciting to be back. I'm going to my college where I'm going to spend some time lecturing of political science and also service class, but I'm receiving one of three people who are receiving the Martin Luther King Jr. Vision Award. And it's an acknowledgement of people who are doing work really in the likeness of Martin Luther King and really focusing on just basic human rights and the work that we do to really advocate and serve the most vulnerable people in the world.
Yes, and of course, Martin Luther King, he had a dream. And of course, Kerry had a dream, and she's fulfilling that today. Congratulations, first of all, on your recognition and your award, and for all the good things you do, not just in our country, but around the world. If you would tell our listening and viewing audience, because we have ECAT, Eastern Community Access Television, that's actually televising our radio show,
That's great.
which reaches out to Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. But what is a shelter box, and what kinds of things come in a shelter box?
So Shelter Box was created 24 years ago, and our founders, who had their roots in Rotary, saw that there was an awful emergency happening. It was the Gujarat earthquake and people dying of exposure, and just the basic needs were going unmet that people have. And our basic needs really revolve around food, water, shelter, and access to medical care. And they created 24 years ago the very first shelter box. And it was based on the premise of what do you need to sustain your life if you are forced to flee your home and you lose everything in an instant. And so the basic center of gravity for what we do and the basic need that we meet is shelter, the provision of emergency shelter, which is really the first step in the recovery process. If you've lost your home, if you've been displaced, whether it's by an awful disaster, an earthquake, a cyclone, a tsunami, or even by war situation,
Wow.
your life stops. And so we provide, and we've provided over 24 years, millions of people with support, and it's really the basics. So in addition to the shelter, the place that you'll call home if you've lost your home in a disaster or an emergency, we provide the basic things to set up a household. So the things you think about: light. So we provide solar lanterns, water. We provide water purification containers to store clean water. We provide a whole stainless steel cook set so you can boil water, prepare a hot meal. We provide lightweight mattresses, blankets, and ground mats, basic tools, just the building blocks so you can have a roof over your head and the basic household items to kickstart your recovery. And so fast forward to today, we started with a singular shelter box item. Today at Shelter Box, we really customize the shelter packages to meet the unique situations that we are facing. And it's very different. So every aid package in each disaster could be a bit different. Different if you're responding to, say, war in Ukraine versus the refugees that have inundated places like the Minnow camp in Cameroon. So the displacement needs are different. So we really try to customize the individual shelter packages to meet the individual responses that we are deployed to. But initially, the Rotarians who founded Shelter Box thought that they would help maybe a couple dozen families a year. And then fast forward to 2024, and we have brought emergency shelter and supplies to over 3 million people in
Wow.
over 100 countries and over 300 disaster and crisis situations. So we've really grown from very humble, modest roots. But even today, the core principles of what we do 24 years later really remain the same, in that believing that shelter is a basic human right and ensuring that the most vulnerable people in the world have access to that when they've lost everything.
If you just joined us, folks, we're talking to Kerry Murray, who is the president of Shelter Box USA out in California. And of course, they take care of disastrous situations. And Kerry, I did want to ask you, how do you find out about the disasters? Of course, it's not a secret.
Mhm,
It's all over the media.
mhm.
But how do you pick and choose where you're going?
Yeah, so we are really monitoring everything that's happening in our world. And so we have a large operations team, and we're monitoring different storms that are coming in and facing different countries, but we're also keeping our pulse on violent conflict and looking at really where are the gaps where we can go in and help families who might otherwise be left behind. So we are responding to obviously the big things that break the media headlines. So we've been working to help people who've been displaced or affected by the war in Ukraine. Over the past 2 years, we're responding to big disasters like this time last year when the devastating earthquake killed 50,000 in southern Turkey and northern Syria. But we're also responding to, and I think the quiet work for us is work that it really doesn't make the headlines. We've been responding for 12 years in Syria, where half the pre-war population has been displaced. We're working across the Lake Chad Basin of Africa. We have a project now in Chad that's helping the big influx of Sudanese refugees. So we really look at the Human Development Index. We look at where are people most vulnerable, where are they likely to have shelter needs, where there are big gaps that exist, where we can go in and really make a transformational difference in the lives of those families. Just recently, I was in the high Atlas Mountains of Morocco, where there was a devastating earthquake. You probably didn't really hear about it because happened right around the time the conflict started between Israel and Gaza. So it barely broke the headlines, but it killed thousands of people. It displaced tens of thousands. And in these traditional villages of the high Atlas Mountains, we worked across 20 of them. They were 95% destroyed. And it was a massive loss of life and livelihood and homes. And we were alongside our partner Rotary and Grand Atlas Foundation, one of the few aid organizations that was providing support to these communities. And we were a lifeline, particularly as winter was about to start and people had nowhere to sleep.
Do you count on Rotarians to be on the spot at the sites that are selected where disasters take place? Somebody's got to be there to help receive the shelter boxes.
It's incredible. The partnership with Rotary International is an absolute force multiplier in our ability to respond and serve so many families. So, what happens in disasters is there's often this urgency to act when something happens, but not great information to act on. So, first and foremost, Rotarians on the ground in these local communities, and in the case of Morocco, it was in Marrakesh, district governor, Rotarians in Morocco, who were the first sources of information coming out. Who's been affected? What's the caseload? How many people? What do the needs look like? And it's really oftentimes Rotary that is enabling us to respond, particularly in difficult to reach areas or complex areas to operate in. So it's Rotary, that's local Rotarians that are the lifeline. Now, when you hit the ground, you often have Rotarians that are serving as translators. They're often serving as volunteers, helping us train communities on how to utilize the aid. They're helping with distributions, but they are absolutely instrumental in enabling the response of ShelterBox in disaster situations. ShelterBox could not do the work that we do without the partnership, the global partnership with Rotary International.
That's tremendous. And I know there are folks out there maybe asking the question, what is Rotary? It's a worldwide organization of men and women, business and professional people, united together to serve. Their motto is service above self. Their mission is to do good in their community and to also do good in the world. And that's what ShelterBox USA is doing. They are stepping up to the plate to make sure that folks and everybody's entitled to have a home or a place to sleep. We're going to take a short break. Kerry, you're listening to Service Matters here on WPRO. This is also a production of ECAT, Eastern Community Access Television. Hurry back.
Disaster, conflict, and climate crisis are forcing more people to flee their homes than ever before. Right now, this is a reality for over 100 million people. Their lives destroyed, futures uncertain. We're ShelterBox, a global community that believes shelter is a human right. Shelter is the foundation for life. A foundation for survival, stability, and dignity. We're united by a shared purpose. No one without shelter after disaster.
Bana ait. Hani orayı fermuarı çektiğim zaman diyorum. Hani kafam rahat.
We enable people to take the first steps towards recovery, providing emergency shelter and aid essentials. Shelter repair kits, water filters, solar lights. Helping people build, repair or return home.
Çok güzel bir duygu yani insanın barınacağı, hani kendini çadır da olsa güvende hissediyorum hani kendimi fermuarını çekince.
We listen to what communities need so that we can effectively respond to complex situations. We support by giving the right emergency shelter items, and we share our expertise, championing local partnerships and standing united on environmental sustainability.
Yemek de rahat yiyemem, yapamam da. Ama burada zevkle çayımı da içiyorum, kahvemi de içiyorum.
When homes are torn apart and lives destroyed, we'll be there. Because life can't wait. Support Shelterbox. Together we can build foundations for life.
Welcome back to another segment of Service Matters. And again, we like to talk about the good things that are happening in local communities and beyond. And of course, Rotary International is a worldwide organization, and they're represented in over 200 countries. And I'm not sure if you've been to 200 countries yet, but there are
Not yet.
disasters taking place. And God bless your family for letting you do a job like this and to visit countries and you're in the helping people business. All of us are. As a matter of fact, Rotary's motto is service above self.
Mhm.
Our sponsor, the Navigant Credit Union, they have 24 branches in the state of Rhode Island, the Ocean State. And of course, their motto is people helping people. And here you are, Kerry, doing just that. And that's when you see an organization like Rotarians, men and women who are able to give their time to serve others. That's a magic word, isn't it? Serve.
Serve, yes. And I as a Rotarian, what I've always really found so inspiring is that Rotarians are truly people of action. And I love that. And it, particularly in our line of work, disaster relief work, that's really important.
Oh my gosh. I know that somebody asked me yesterday, what does a shelter box cost?
Mhm.
And at the end of the disaster, where does that shelter box go? Does it go back to the person that used it?
Mhm. So a traditional shelter box, which contained a tent and also blankets, ground mats, solar lanterns, water purification unit, cook sets, fully loaded, it was $1,000 delivered. And that serves one family. And a family will live in that shelter and use those materials for many months after losing their home. Over the years, we've really worked to innovate and meet the unique needs and customize the aid packages based on the needs of the family. So it really varies today. At the high end, 1,000. At the low end, a shelter kit, which can create a single room structure or repair a home that's been damaged. We did thousands of these repair kits in Ukraine for people who were living in damaged homes. Those were $100 delivered. But it's, it really varies based on the aid package that we're developing for the situation, but it would go anywhere from $100 to $1,000.
How about first aid kits? Do you provide those or do you stay away from that? Because we're talking disasters, not someone who cut a finger.
We don't do medical relief. That's not what our core mission is. However, as we've worked to customize the aid packages, one of the aid items that has been particularly important when you've been displaced are hygiene kits. And so we are creating specialized hygiene kits for people who are displaced. And that is also really crucial for families who don't have just the basics to care for themselves.
It's interesting, we talk about Rotary and the partnership that they have with Shelter Box USA. I remember watching on one of the TV channels, they were going to interview a couple of first responders.
Mhm.
They thought they were first responders. It was two Rotarians
Mhm.
who were there at the site. And they said, we're not first responders involved in medical help and support, but we were here first
Mhm.
and we responded.
Mhm.
And I thought that was very clever. Two Rotarians And of course, that was the real thing. They were there to do what they could to help. You know, you got lots of people that you certainly want to thank, and you certainly can't go into names because you're talking thousands of people who help make Shelter Box USA work.
Mhm.
But do you have a board of directors?
We do. We have a volunteer board of directors. They are nationally based across the US. So we have an international member as well. We also have hundreds of volunteers, both our ambassadors, of which we have many in Massachusetts, as you know, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New England area. We also have shelter box response team members. These are some of the most highly trained people in emergency response. They deploy to the front lines of disaster and crisis situations. We do have a small paid staff, but far more volunteers around the US and around the world that really enable the work of Shelter Box. And then, of course, the supporters that make it possible because we are privately funded. We don't accept currently government money. And so it's really private charitable support, people who learn about our work, who want to make an impact and help someone who maybe is across the world, someone they'll never meet, but whose life they could really transform. And
If someone, Kerry, wishes to donate towards a Shelter Box, who would they contact? Is there a web page? Is there a way to reach out? There may be folks out there listening that are saying what a terrific thing for Shelter Box USA to do to help people involved in disasters.
Shelterbox is a 501c3 charitable organization. We do have a website. It's shelterboxusa.org. We also have obviously social media as well. You can learn more, but on our website at shelterboxusa.org, you can learn about volunteer opportunities. You can learn how to make a donation, and you can learn more about our projects that are going on today all across the world.
It's amazing. Rotary International is very much involved in a lot of different challenges. They are partners with Shelter Box USA. They have a top priority to eradicate polio in the world. And of course, they get a lot of action groups, including the one that I'm involved with, to help people that may have Alzheimer's/dementia. A Rotary Action Group that's doing what they can to help senior adults out that have family members that may have to deal with this kind of a challenge. But Shelter Box saves lives. It provides a place for people to sleep. It provides an opportunity for a family to be undercover. And hats off to Shelter Box USA for making this happen. Did this start in England?
It did. It started as a millennial project. It started really at the beginning of 2000, and it was a handful of volunteer Rotarians that created the very first Shelter Box. At the time in the world, there was a devastating earthquake, and it was called the Gujarat earthquake, and people were dying of exposure. People didn't have access to just the basics, and groups bringing in food and water, but where were people going to sleep and really start to rebuild their lives? So at the time, they saw a big gap, and there is a massive gap in the provision of emergency shelter. And it's massively underfunded. And yet it's one of the biggest issues facing our world is global displacement. There's more people displaced in the world than any other time. It's 114 million people. And that number is only growing as a result of disaster, conflict, and climate. And what our founders, the Rotarians in England, they created the first one, and they hoped at the time to help a couple dozen families a year. And as I mentioned, fast forward to today, and we're helping hundreds of thousands of people every year. And we are still, not coming close to even meeting part of the need. The need is so massive. And so our organization has been continuing to scale our humanitarian efforts.
Kerry Murray is her name. She is the president of Shelter Box USA. We're going to take another short break. We'll come back and learn more about Shelter Box and how important it is to families who are devastated after a disaster that takes place. We'll be back after these important messages.
Disaster, conflict, and climate crisis are forcing more people to flee their homes than ever before. Right now, this is a reality for over 100 million people. Their lives destroyed, futures uncertain. We're Shelterbox, a global community that believes shelter is a human right. Shelter is the foundation for life. A foundation for survival, stability, and dignity. We're united by a shared purpose. No one without shelter after disaster.
Bana ait. Hani orayı fermuarı çektiğim zaman oh diyorum. Hani kafam rahat.
We enable people to take the first steps towards recovery, providing emergency shelter and aid essentials. Shelter repair kits, water filters, solar lights. Helping people build, repair or return home.
Çok güzel bir duygu yani insanın barınacağı, hani kendini çadır da olsa güvende hissediyorum hani kendimi fermuarını çekince.
We listen to what communities need so that we can effectively respond to complex situations. We support by giving the right emergency shelter items, and we share our expertise, championing local partnerships and standing united on environmental sustainability.
Yemek de rahat yemem, yapamam da. Ama burada zevkle çayımı da içiyorum, kahvemi de içiyorum.
When homes are torn apart and lives destroyed, we'll be there. Because life can't wait. Support Shelterbox. Together we can build foundations for life.
We're back for another segment of Service Matters. You know, for the past 15 years doing this show, Kerry, we've had a lot of good reasons why this show is important. Not just talking about the good things, but today's a perfect example. Here we have a 501c3 nonprofit group that's doing what they can to provide shelter for folks who have witnessed a serious disaster. And I say hats off to all the folks that are involved with Shelter Box. I had some close friends who have been very much involved. Steve Saverin from my Rotary Club, the Rotary Club of Sharon, Massachusetts. And of course, Ken Kaplan, he's from Sarasota, Florida. I was hoping that he might zoom in on our conversation today, but he certainly has served as an ambassador and been on your board for a certain period of time. Fran Jeffries, she's a person who has been around the world doing what she can to help people out. And as I said earlier, we're all in the helping people business. What can you say about your mission and your vision for Shelter Box USA?
Well, I would say, as it relates to the mission of the organization, what I love so much about the work of Shelterbox is that we are reaching so many families and so many communities that would otherwise might be forgotten, and some of the most vulnerable people in our world. And when you look on the Human Development Index, some of the poorest places on the planet. And when I talk about global displacement and 114 million people, one thing that's important to know is 75% of those people are women and children. And women, particularly, and children suffer disproportionately in disasters in so many ways. So when I think about my vision is definitely aligned with our organization. No family without shelter after disaster. And also, we need to keep going and growing to be able to serve to meet the needs of what's happening in our world today. But when I think about people who really matter and why I do this work, and I'm gonna show you this picture, and unfortunately, your listeners won't be able to see it, but I'm going to describe it for them. I was up in the high Atlas Mountains.
Well, our viewers will be able to see it because we'll pass this over to our producer.
Great.
And it's truly amazing when you talk about a family dealing with a disaster.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, there are families out there that, without being involved in a disaster, they are in a disastrous situation.
Yes, yes,
And
just
they
like, yeah,
live in nice homes.
yeah.
But the fact is that how important it is for all of us to get along with each other and to do what we can to help each other out, especially during a disaster.
Mhm.
I did want to once again repeat your webpage
Mhm.
to let people know where they can make a contribution or how they can actually get involved in a shelter box as a volunteer, and maybe they can contact their local Rotary Club.
Yes, so I am a big believer that everyone has something to contribute. So whether it's your time and your talent or your resources, everyone can make a difference. And that can go a long way at a group like Shelterbox because we really are a testament to volunteers and public service and people of action who are making a difference for others across the world. So on our website at shelterboxusa.org, there are specific pages where you can learn about the projects, you can learn about volunteer opportunities, and you can make a donation that will have a transformational impact on the life of a family that's lost everything. Shelterboxusa.org.
Kerry, say hello to John Hugo. John is not with us today, but I'm going to send him a copy of the podcast. And of course, he certainly realizes and understands the story about Shelterbox, but I wanted to share this with him, the fact that you're in this
Yes,
neck of the
he
woods.
is a fantastic human and an inspiring Rotarian. So, hi, John, and thank you for all of your incredible service at Rotary International. You are just a true fearless leader and making an impact every day.
Well said, and I second that motion. I would like to say, Kerry, how many countries have you actually visited as the
Oh, dear.
president?
Many. Most recently, I was in, as I mentioned, Morocco. I was also worked extensively in Ukraine on the crisis there, starting in Poland 2 years ago, and Ukraine this past year, supporting families who had lost everything. And what was at the time, at the beginning of the war, what we were seeing at the border in Poland was the fastest moving refugee crisis since World War II. So think about that. That's the millions of people crossing the borders in an instant with little more than the clothes on their back and no idea of where they were going to sleep. And so, for me, it's really important to go to the front lines and to go and work and meet the beneficiaries and understand their needs and really try to translate that back and share what they're going through. Many times the work that we're doing doesn't make the headlines. Sometimes it does. But it's so critical that many of these folks don't really have a voice, and to help bring their voice and what they're experiencing and the crisis situations they're facing, and really hoping to inspire others to help us make a difference in their lives.
I'd also like to share this video, whether it be radio or TV, with local Rotary clubs. They need to hear this. I wish that you could be at every Rotary club to speak. You're very passionate about what you do, and your roots come here from New England, and you're spreading the good word. And just listening to you, you're not a first-time visitor to WPRO, but it's you've come a long way, and certainly Rhode Island did a good job educating you because you sound like the real deal, no doubt about it.
Wow.
Anything you'd like to say about some circumstances that you might have been involved in. Do you ever hear from any of the people that have been involved in a disaster and they wanted to call up and say thank you?
Well, actually, this week we received a video on WhatsApp, and some really awful conditions hit the high Atlas Mountains where we put quite a few tents up. And they wanted to show us that despite some extraordinary wind and weather conditions, the tents were doing quite well at weathering the storms they were confronting this winter, which feels good to know that, they're doing their job. But the interesting thing for Shelterbox is that we are working all over the world. Sometimes it's disaster situations where we are in and out after several months. And then some areas we are working in long, protracted conflict situations. So I mentioned Syria. It's the longest and largest piece of our work. It's 12 years. Ukraine has been 2 years now. It was really interesting for me to go at the very beginning, the initial days of the war, and to come back then a year later at the 1 year anniversary and meet with families and learn about what was happening with their lives. So I think it's really important to go and to learn and to understand what these people are confronting. So the picture I was showing you is the woman is in all white. You can see her, Dave. When I was working in the high Atlas Mountains last month, and I met and we were doing distributions, and there were many women coming to the distributions dressed in all white, head to toe. And I had asked them, and we were speaking through a translator in Berber, and I said, "Why are the women wearing white?" And they said, because when you are in mourning in Morocco, you wear white for a period of 4 months. They all lost their husbands who were crushed in the earthquake. And the woman I'm with in this photo, her name is Fadma. She had lost her husband. He was in the next room when it hit at 11 o'clock at night, and he was crushed in the rubble and killed. And she had nowhere to sleep. These families were sleeping outdoors, and they didn't know how they were going to make it through the winter. And to be able to go with Rotary and to be part of the Shelterbox distributions and know that that evening she was going to be finally moving into her Shelterbox tent and really starting the long road to recovery. And I spent the day with her. She took me to see the site where her home had collapsed. And at the end of the day, when I was going to leave, she held me, and she held on for like a minute. And she had told the translator that she couldn't believe that we had come all the way from America and that we came to help her. And she thought that she was forgotten. And you could see in the moment, like, how much this meant to her. And I just remember thinking, like, no matter how much this means to her, this means so much more to me. Like that we were able to make an impact in this person's life. And also that we can bring people of different parts of the world, different faiths, right? Different beliefs, different customs. We can bring people together. And at the end of the day, my feeling is we're not all that different. Despite seemingly living across the world and having the things we value at the core, right? No matter where I go in the world, they're the same, right? It's family, it's faith, it's community, right? It's the basics.
It's interesting. I know we talked earlier, not just about Rotary, but even the Lions Club. They have lots of diversification, and you can see that when you go to a convention. We're going to take a final break. I'm Dave Clifton here along with Kerry Murray, the president of Shelterbox USA, how important it is to help save a life for folks that have been involved in a disaster. We'll be back after these important messages.
Disaster, conflict, and climate crisis are forcing more people to flee their homes than ever before. Right now, this is a reality for over 100 million people. Their lives destroyed, futures uncertain. We're Shelterbox, a global community that believes shelter is a human right. Shelter is the foundation for life. A foundation for survival, stability, and dignity. We're united by a shared purpose. No one without shelter after disaster.
Bana ait. Hani orayı fermuarı çektiğim zaman oh diyorum. Hani kafam rahat.
We enable people to take the first steps towards recovery, providing emergency shelter and aid essentials. Shelter repair kits, water filters, solar lights. Helping people build, repair or return home.
Çok güzel bir duygu yani insanın barınacağı, hani kendini çadır da olsa güvende hissediyorum hani kendimi fermuarını çekince.
We listen to what communities need so that we can effectively respond to complex situations. We support by giving the right emergency shelter items, and we share our expertise, championing local partnerships and standing united on environmental sustainability.
Yemek de rahat yemem, yapamam da. Ama burada zevkle çayımı da içiyorum, kahvemi de içiyorum.
When homes are torn apart and lives destroyed, we'll be there. Because life can't wait. Support Shelterbox. Together we can build foundations for life.
Welcome back to the final segment of Service Matters. A big shout out and thank you to the Navakan Credit Union. They have 24 branches scattered throughout the Ocean State. And their motto, as I mentioned earlier, is people have helping people. And that's really what we're talking about today as we key in on Shelterbox USA. I'm fortunate to have the president of that 501c3 nonprofit group that is doing what they can to help save lives around the world. Have we ever done a disaster in our own country that you came to the rescue in terms of Shelterbox?
Yes. So the first time Shelterbox responded in the US was Hurricane Katrina. And we've also responded in Superstorm Sandy, in Moore, Oklahoma. And one that I was on the ground for helping was in Houston after Hurricane Harvey. And that was a really unique one because you had thousands of people that were sheltering at the George R. Brown Convention Center, originally set up for 5,000 people, and you had 15,000 people who trailers washed away, they lost everything, and they literally showed up with just the clothes on their back and had nothing. And that was a really devastating one that FEMA had called us and said, we need our nonprofit partners to help fill gaps. And I'll tell you, there were a lot of gaps to fill, even times in our own country. In a place that seemingly we have a safety net, there are times when our own systems are overwhelmed here in the US. So it's an exception, not a rule. We don't, we typically go to in the poorest places and the most vulnerable in our world, but there are times when we've been called in to help.
Tell us about the Nobel Peace Award. Shelterbox was nominated a couple of times.
Yes. So Shelterbox has been twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and it's an acknowledgement of what I call our quiet work. It's the work that we do in the world's worst conflict situations, some of the most dangerous places in the world. And it is truly life-saving for the families that we are serving in these places, like in Syria. We've been working for 12 years, like the Lake Chad Basin, like the Minnow camp in Cameroon. But really, when you look at global displacement at 114 million and counting, the fastest growing piece of displacement is because of violent conflict. We've seen it in the past few years in a big way because of the war in Ukraine. We're seeing it now in Gaza, right? Where 90% of the population is now displaced, 2 million people.
It's amazing what actually goes on. I'd like to give a thank you to Adam Carrero, our producer here at the TV studio. And would also like to thank back in Providence at the WPRO studio, Brett Ferruccio. He's the executive producer at the station. And I'm sorry that we didn't have our other guests with us today, but I certainly wanted to recognize a couple of ambassadors that work with Shelter Box USA. Ken Kaplan, Steve Saverin, and there are many others.
Fran
Fran Jeffries.
just recently jumped in the sea and did the polar plunge. And I love this woman. She is an incredible ambassador. She raised over $7,000 jumping in the sea on January 1st. And she does it with so much enthusiasm. And we love Fran as well.
And Fran, of course, her and my wife went to South Africa on a visit on behalf of Rotary. And she enjoys doing that. She certainly exemplifies the Rotary motto, and of course, believes in people helping people. Any final comment you'd like to make, Kerry? And again, I appreciate so much that you joined me on the air. You're exactly what I expected coming from a president of Shelter Box USA, but even better, the fact that you have the passion for it and you care about people.
Well, just thank you so much for having me. And we're both Rotarians and we're both big fans of Shelter Box. And I think these are two incredible organizations that are bringing the world together in all the right ways. And in a time when our world is so divided, to have Rotary in over 200 countries, Shelter Box has worked in over 100, and that we are bringing peace, that we're bringing compassion, that we're bringing empathy, and we're bringing us closer together. And that's so important right now, where we are at this point.
Are you a Paul Harris Fellow?
I am. One time Paul Harris Fellow.
It's terrific and very deserving, but I'm going to work at getting you a second one.
Oh, thank you.
Didn't mean to announce that on the air, but the fact is that you deserve all the credit from the founder of Rotary, Paul Harris. I would like to say that it was Gandhi who once said, and I quote, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of helping others." And that's Kerry Murray, the president of Shelter Box USA. And it's good. I got excited when the USA won the hockey championship. And I'm excited today about the good work that you're doing with Shelter Box USA. And we're going to help share that and pass the word around about the importance. Kerry, that's going to wrap it up for our show today. We thank our producers. This has been a production of not only WPRO, the radio voice of Southern New England, but also it's a production of ECAT, Eastern Community Access Television. We say to folks out there, go forth to serve. Do it with a smile on your face, just like Kerry has done today. And that music that I always like to play on my show for the past 15 years. What a wonderful world. And what a wonderful world it is because of people like Kerry Murray from California. I'm glad that she's in the shoes that she's in because the world can be a greater place because of her taking care of those in need. Thank you, folks, for joining us. And we wish you nothing but the best. Continue to serve others.